Hey guys, it's me, Dr. Cameron Dennis, physical therapist with Back on Track Therapy and Wellness, and I wanted to talk to you about tight hamstrings. Is this something that you've dealt with? I think a majority of runners at some point have experienced tight hamstrings, which can bother you and keep you from sleeping at times even, if you wake up with charley horses and things like that, or it can even affect your running. So what do I typically see in people who complain of tight hamstrings? The first thing I would say is that their hamstrings aren't really abnormally tight. What we find is that oftentimes they have a shift in their pelvis. So what happens is your hamstrings come from here and they go down your leg, correct? So if your hamstrings go from your butt down to the back, down to your knee, if your pelvis is tilted this way, if your pelvis is tilted this way, resulting in an excessive curve here. Oftentimes, if that happens, what we have is tightness in here in the lower back. So tightness here, okay? Weakness here, tight hip flexors, okay? And weak glutes as well. So that causes that pelvic tilt, okay? When it does that, what you'll find is the hamstrings are naturally more tight in that position. So what is that going to do? It's going to cause discomfort in some situations, and others you won't have it. It just depends on the severity and what you're doing. So if you're constantly stretching the hamstrings, even though they're already sort of stretched out anyway, you're potentially putting yourself at risk for further injury. One thing you're not doing is helping the situation. So oftentimes when runners have tight hamstrings, I look at the lower back to see how flexible they are through their spine. I look at the hip flexors to see if those are strong and loose, because oftentimes even with tightness in the lower back and tightness in the hip flexors, it isn't just because the muscles are shortened, it's because they're weak. And so when the muscles are weak, oftentimes you find that they tighten up. Okay, it's a body's protective mechanism. And so what I suggest, and a lot of people with hamstring tightness, is to actually strengthen the hamstrings, strengthen the lower back, strengthen the glutes, strengthen your abs, and strengthen your hip flexors. So in some cases, you do have a runner with tight hamstrings that, it's really limiting what they're able to do on a daily basis. There are simple hamstring stretches, such as just leaning forward and touching your toes. But in general, I don't think that chronically tight hamstrings is a huge problem for most runners. As a matter of fact, in some runners, it's actually been correlated with better performance. And so most runners that I see actually have tight hamstrings, but I don't necessarily go in and address them unless it's through some sort of strengthening or a dynamic warm-up, that type of thing. So go ahead and address those areas and see what you think, and hopefully this helps. Once again, this is Dr. Cameron Dennis, physical therapist with Back on Track Therapy and Wellness. And if you haven't checked it out yet, be sure to check out our running injury support group on Facebook for more answers like this. Thanks.